Welcome to this documentary-style explainer. Today, we're opening up the historical dossier on some of humanity's absolute most unexplainable physical anomalies. Because honestly, if our standard timeline of history is completely correct, a lot of what we are about to look at simply shouldn't exist. We're going to treat the ancient world like an active, ongoing investigation, analyzing the structural and textual evidence left behind by civilizations that were separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles. So we're plunging right into this documentary look at the past to ask one fundamental question. Did our ancestors possess lost high-tech tools? Were the really incredible events and constructions of antiquity simply miracles or natural phenomena? Or were they the result of advanced, perhaps even extraterrestrial technology? It sets up the ultimate historical showdown, really. Mainstream archaeology versus ancient astronaut theory. Let's dive in and look at the evidence. All right, let's jump straight into Case File 1, the sonic weapon events. According to historical and religious accounts, you have the Israelites marching around the city of Jericho for 7 days. They're blowing ram's horns, they've got the Ark of the Covenant with them, and then suddenly, the massive city walls just violently collapse. Now, mainstream scholars look at this and very rationally point to a perfectly timed natural earthquake. But ancient astronaut theorists? They look at the exact same event and see a technological blueprint. They suggest the Ark of the Covenant wasn't just some sacred box, but an actual technological power source that amplified the sound of those horns into a directed sonic blast, capable of vibrating huge stone walls into rubble. And to really understand how sound could possibly destroy a wall, you just have to look at our own modern technology. Today, militaries and law enforcement use acoustic devices like the LRAD to disable targets with a really concentrated piercing sound that actually exceeds 150 decibels. It's so intense, it was even used to successfully repel pirates off the coast of Somalia. So it really forces us to ask, were ancient accounts of divine wrath actually primitive descriptions of advanced directed energy acoustic weapons? Moving right along, we open Case File 2, the precision tool Enigma. Mainstream Egyptologists firmly maintain that ancient builders used only rudimentary tools. We are talking about copper chisels, which were sometimes cold hammered just to give them a little more hardness, along with sand for friction, wooden mallets, and stone pounding balls. Mainstream science maintains this is absolutely all it took to carve intensely hard stones like granite and diorite, which, when you think about it, is essentially the equivalent of trying to carve a modern skyscraper using a spoon and a rock. But engineering expert Chris Dunn points to one specific artifact that completely shatters this supposed technological limitation. It's a grooved granite drill core, discovered back in the late 19th century by British archaeologist Sir Flinders Petrie. Petrie himself was just absolutely amazed by this perfectly circular core. He even theorized that the Egyptians must have possessed diamonds to cut it, even though, importantly, no diamonds from that era have ever been found anywhere in Egypt. So to test the mainstream theory, Dunn actually took it upon himself to painstakingly recreate the ancient drilling process using a copper tube and sand. He then took his newly drilled core and the ancient Petrie core and examined both of them under a high-tech industrial microscope. His copper and sand core produced these really shallow, unclear striations. The original artifact from the Petrie Museum, on the other hand, it showed deep, clear, perfectly spaced grooves. These are striations that some experts theorize are literally impossible to make by human hands, requiring the aggressive feed rate of automated power tools. Theorists claim we are seeing an astonishing machine-level tolerance on these ancient artifacts. We're talking about precision down to 0.0002 inches. To put that into perspective, that is a fraction of the thickness of a single human hair. When experts overlay transparencies of the left and right sides of the massive Ramses statue, they find perfect, machine-like symmetry. Dunn even noted an accidental undercut at the Luxor Museum that looks exactly like a modern tool slip. And he found cuts at Abu Roash that, geometrically speaking, would require a modern 35-foot diameter circular saw. Okay, let's open Case File 3, Ancient Power and Computing. If we map these events out on a timeline, it reveals a vast span of anomalous technological leaps. We see hints of advanced warfare at Jericho around 1400 BC, but if we fast forward to around 200 BC, we encounter a physical object that totally rewrote the history of mechanical engineering. It was a mysterious, coral-encrusted metal box recovered from a shipwreck. This is the Antikythera mechanism. Found by Greek sponge divers in 1900, it acted as a highly sophisticated astronomical and astrological computer. Mainstream archaeologists in the 1950s finally X-rayed it and were completely baffled to find incredibly intricate, interconnected gear wheels hidden inside. It was as mechanically complex as a modern Swiss watch, yet it was built over 2 millennia ago. Experts famously liken this discovery to finding a jet airplane inside King Tut's tomb. It really is that genuinely awe-inspiring. But here's the thing. If they had advanced tools or mechanical computers, what about raw power? Looking back at Egypt, scholars argue that those deep, narrow, underground crypts were simply lit by torches. But follow the investigative logic here. If they used fire, there should be soot on the ceilings, right? Well, there isn't a single trace. Plus, there's an absolute lack of oxygen in those deep chambers to even sustain a flame. Because of this, theorists point to secret wall reliefs at Dendera that vividly depict massive bulb-like objects that look remarkably like modern cathode ray tubes or light bulbs. And to prove ancient electricity was physically possible, and to explain how a Dendera light bulb might actually work, theorists look to the 3,000-year-old Baghdad battery found over in Iraq. Mainstream science suggests it was just used for electroplating jewelry, but theorists recreated it using these exact steps. You take a clay pot, add a copper lining, an iron rod with an asphalt stopper, and a weak acid like wine or orange juice. When you hook that setup to a voltmeter, it successfully generates a measurable electrical charge. This isn't just some wild theory. The physical capacity for ancient electricity is an accepted reality. Which brings us to our final dossier, Case File 4, the Megalithic Mysteries. While mainstream science mostly marvels at the immense human labor and the sheer willpower required to move these massive stones at the Giza Valley temples, theorists ask a completely different, very practical question. Why? Why deliberately make the job exponentially harder for yourself if you only possess primitive tools? Normally, you'd use much smaller, manageable stones. But these builders deliberately chose to quarry, move, and lift semi-truck-sized 100-ton blocks of granite. Just to put that in perspective, that's the equivalent of squeezing 100 family cars together into a single stone block. And high up in the Andes Mountains at Pumapunku, things get even stranger. We find these impossibly smooth, interlocking diorite blocks that somehow survived a massive cataclysm. Mainstream archaeology attributes this site to native Inca ancestors, but the local legends themselves actually contradict this. When the Spanish conquerors first arrived and asked the Inca who built it, the locals flat out said their ancestors didn't do it. They claimed the creator god Viracocha levitated the stones into place using the sound of a trumpet, building the entire site overnight. Some theorists look at this idea of overnight construction and suggest Pumapunku wasn't a city at all, but a rapidly deployed extraterrestrial base camp. Just 12 miles away at Tiahuanaco, we find the Gateway of the Sun, which is believed to be an entrance funneling right into Pumapunku. Now, where mainstream archaeologists see beautiful religious iconography on a massive 10-ton arch, ancient astronaut theorists see something straight out of a sci-fi documentary. They see sky visitors operating what looks like a sophisticated processing factory or spaceport. This single andesite stone features intricate carvings of nearly 50 winged beings surrounding the god Viracocha. And remarkably, it contains a calendar that some interpret as dating all the way back to 27,000 BC. So, as we close out this explainer, the physical evidence really backs us into a corner. We've investigated the sonic anomalies at Jericho, those impossibly machine-perfect cuts on Egyptian granite, and the completely real electrical charge of the Baghdad battery. So what does this all mean? Are we just totally underestimating the sheer raw genius of primitive humanity? Or is human history suffering from a massive case of